Welcome back into the GSMC Sports Podcast. We're headed into our final segment of the day where I want to sort of take a quick look ahead here at some of the top candidates for these major NFL honors headed into next season. So without further ado here, and by the way, in the comment section, absolutely let us know your takes on some of these names. We're going to be doing maybe a little bit of a quick run through in some of these instances. I'd be happy to touch on any particular player that you guys have for this upcoming season, but I want to start with Offensive Rookie of the Year, where Caleb Williams is the overwhelming favorite to win this award, and for good reason. With the amount of love that he has gotten sort of as a prospect headed up to this point, it's really no surprise that, he, the individual player, would be the favorite for this. But then you also take into consideration the situation that he's walking into, where he has all of these weapons around him. DJ Moore, Keenan Allen, they go out and they draft Rome Odunze, a very deep running back room as well, and outside of maybe a little bit of questions surrounding the offensive line, I think that Caleb Williams has all of the pieces around him to succeed. And again, I'm not necessarily guaranteeing anything here, but I do look at the rookie season that CJ Stroud just had, and I love CJ Stroud. We just sort of went on about him in the last segment as well, but I think that Caleb Williams could very likely have a comparable season to what CJ Stroud just put out there with a Texans team that has talent, no doubt, but not to the level of what Chicago has headed into next season. And listen, I know that a lot of people are not in on Caleb Williams based off of some types of personality stuff, and he's definitely, a face of this upcoming generation of quarterbacks in terms of the way that he sort of handles his business with some things, but I think that the talent's absolutely there. Now, I guess there is definitely a concern with him in terms of, is he going to be necessarily mature enough in the pocket to make the right plays, not hold on to the ball too long, especially if that offensive line is collapsing a little bit. Is he going to be able to sort of take advantage of having all of these weapons around him? But I do believe in what the Bears have built up around him. We've gone back and sort of looked into it in the past. I think that this is quite possibly the best situation a first-round quarterback has walked into since the beginning of the 21st century, at least, is where I sort of went back and looked at the research of it. But some of the other candidates here as well, of course, Jane Daniels, the number 2 overall pick in Washington, and there are some receivers there that sort of don't get quite as much love as they probably should in Terry McLaurin and Jahan Dotson. Dotson especially, I feel like, is one of the more underrated wide receivers in the NFL. The Commanders went out and made a bunch of different moves trying to bolster their offensive line a little bit, starting with the center position where they went out and got Tyler Biotish. They brought in a running back as well as Eckler, who I know that he's not the prime version of himself, but I do think can sort of play well in the passing game alongside Brian Robinson. So there are different, options there at for Daniels to sort of play with in this upcoming season. Third longest odds are Marvin Harrison Jr. Should be really interesting to see with him, where he seems very league ready, and he has a quarterback that hasn't necessarily had this level. Obviously, DeAndre Hopkins was special for a bit there with Kyler Murray, but definitely a little bit of an older version, and Marvin Harrison Jr. I think has a very high ceiling. So ultimately, I do think this award is going to be going to Caleb Williams, and that's where my money would be. But as we know, a lot of the times these don't necessarily perfectly play out how we believe. Now, I think it's probably going to be a quarterback is the reality of the situation. Now, CJ Stroud, again, I'm not saying he wasn't deserving of it by any means. Puka Nacua absolutely had a nice case for it as well. But if Puka isn't going to win it last year, I sort of find it hard to believe unless all of the quarterbacks, all of the 6 that were drafted in the first round, are unsuccessful this season, I would imagine it's probably going to be going to a quarterback. J.J. McCarthy, by the way, 4th in odds according to DraftKings. But Defensive Rookie of the Year, this one, I went back and did a little bit of sort of research around the history of the award because I was curious, how they typically value the different positions in these instances. And if you want to go back the past decade, we have seen 6 sort of, interior rusher, or not interior necessarily, but frontline rushers. And I included Micah Parsons in that list because, especially in his rookie season, what he was sort of doing best was being an edge rusher for them. So, 6 linemen if you want to include Parsons there. If you want to throw him into the linebacker category, him and Shaq Leonard are the only 2 linebackers to win the award in the past decade. And then we've seen 3 corners win it in the past decade: Sauce Gardner, Marshawn Lattimore, and Marcus Peters. Which, the interesting part about this is the fact that before Peters won it in 2015, the last cornerback to win Defensive Rookie of the Year was actually Charles Woodson in 1998, one of my favorite players in NFL history. But I think that does sort of go to show the development of how we sort of view these positions in the NFL. The majority of the 2000s, especially early on and into the early 2010s, was dominated by linebackers. The, classic middle linebacker who is stuffing the run and being the on-the-field general isn't necessarily quite as valued in today's NFL. So the top candidates for this are edge rushers and they are cornerbacks, where you look, Dallas Turner is the favorite as things currently stand. Laiatu Latu follows him up along with Quinion Mitchell. And then if you go down the list here, now granted, linebackers obviously in this year's draft weren't quite as successful, or I wouldn't say successful, but there weren't really seen to be quite as many top-end options from a linebacker perspective. Edgerrin Cooper, who was the first linebacker taken off the board, and it was the 2nd or 3rd round, sort of blending in here at this point, but I believe he is sitting at the 12th best odds. So we're going to see an edge rusher or a cornerback. Now, I think that if Laiatu Latu stays healthy, he is in prime position to take this award. It does interest me with Dallas Turner, where they went out and they brought in a number of different players as well, especially in that defensive front, that there are going to be some bodies potentially taking away from overall sack production with him. But I mean, Dallas Turner was the number 1, no, he was not. Latu was the number 1 defensive end that was taken off the board, but Dallas Turner was seen as sort of the highest upside coming into the draft. Again, I think that Latu, the concern with him is health, but he is an absolute dog, so that would probably be my pick at this point. But I would also be a little curious, at least on DraftKings right now. Chop Robinson is 6th in odds at plus 1,300. Was drafted in by the Dolphins late in the 1st round. He's somebody where, as long as that, athleticism translates, which I expect him to, can he develop sort of the more technical skills from a defensive line perspective? I think that he can definitely win this award as well. Offensive Player of the Year, it's the usual suspects here, where Tyreek Hill, Christian McCaffrey, CeeDee Lamb, these are the types of names that we're looking at. I think that if Tyreek Hill stays healthy, he has a real chance to win this. Now, he did last year as well, and you can make a very similar case for Christian McCaffrey, who ultimately did come home with the award, and I think had a better case for MVP than a lot of people were sort of projecting. Knock on wood that Christian McCaffrey stays healthy. I do feel like Tyreek is the better injury bet. This is an award that I wouldn't put any amount of money on in particular, but I do think that really those top 2 are where things get interesting. if you are looking for a little bit of a long shot and you believe in J.J. McCarthy, I mean, there's a chance you could sort of pair him up with Justin Jefferson. Jefferson is at plus 1,500 odds according to DraftKings to win this award. I expect a big year out of him. Is J.J. McCarthy going to be the player to get the ball to him enough is the question. But let me know your thoughts in the comment section. Defensive Player of the Year. Again, a lot of the usual characters for this award as we have this just unbelievable collection of defensive end talent in the NFL where the top 5 are all just like the fact that we have Myles Garrett, who won Defensive Player of the Year last year. He's 5th on this list, just goes to show the depth of talent at the defensive end position. TJ Watt is the front runner, followed by Micah Parsons. Nick Bosa and Max Crosby are tied for 3rd, and then it's Myles Garrett. Feels like it's going to have to be one of those players, each and every one of them a dominant force up front. I think I would probably lean TJ Watt. There was a huge argument for him last year. Obviously, that's where the debates around pass rush win rate and all of that, how much should that be taken into account. But I think that maybe, as long as he has another impactful season like he does, I don't want to say a complete correction, but I think that voters probably come back around to TJ Watt considering how dominant he is. And we've seen the difference of that Steelers defense when he is on and off the field. But finally here, MVP, like we sort of talked about before the break, CJ Stroud in the top 3 for MVP odds. It's Patrick Mahomes, it's Josh Allen, and then it is Stroud and Burrow, followed behind by Lamar Jackson at plus 1,000 as well to try and repeat as the MVP in this coming season. Some very interesting names following up that as well, where Jordan Love and Brock Purdy are plus 1,200 as well. I don't know about either one of those, but we do know the history of this award is, I think it's something like 13 or 14 of the past 15 years, the MVP award has been given to a player that is on a team with a top 2 record in their conference. So team success is everything in terms of this, which is why, again, I love CJ Stroud and I'm really excited for his future. But do we think that the Texans are going to be a top 2 team in the AFC? Now, I'm not saying it's completely unrealistic, and it could definitely be on the table, but that's a bet I just don't know if I'm willing to take. Again, let me know if you feel differently in the comment section, but you can make a case as well. The Bills definitely got worse from last season to this year with a lot of their departures. I do feel like overall some people are sort of overrating their losses, and I do think that the Bills, they ended up as the 2 seed despite having what felt like a really bad regular season last year, and they ended up locking down that 2 seed. Ultimately here, I think Josh Allen is probably where I would lean. I expect him to still remain putting up big stats without Stephon Diggs. I've talked about this on the show before. I actually felt like where Josh Allen struggled at times when he was trying to force feed Stephon Diggs a little bit more, and down the second half of the season he just sort of abandoned that, and I thought that that's when the Bills offense really started getting more methodical and playing at a higher level. So I think that Josh Allen, also understanding that there is this sort of exterior narrative that is going to be surrounding them a little bit in terms of, can Josh Allen prove himself without Stephon Diggs? I do believe he can. And I think that some of the injuries that they'll be returning from, specifically on the defensive side of the ball, is going to help for them. But, very obviously early ahead of the NFL season to be running through all of this, but I was curious where sort of Vegas was at this point. But let me know your picks for MVP and all of these awards in the comments section. But that is all we have time for today. Thank you very much for tuning into the GSMC Sports Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. Remember to like, follow, subscribe wherever you keep up with us. Be sure to follow us on social media as well for more exclusive short content. We stream here live, at least our show, every 2 to 3 p.m. Eastern. Be sure to check out our other shows as well, though. We got the baseball podcast coming on next with Sam Menzie very shortly. But we will be back tomorrow afternoon. We will see you then. Take care.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet. Damn, ain't that great. I don't wanna go.